Disclaimer: the following story is intended for a mature audience. Viewer discretion is advised. I never expected to hear my stepson's voice on the other end of the line that night. It was well past midnight, and the house was silent until my phone buzzed, shattering the stillness. My heart skipped a beat when I saw his name flash across the screen. A call at this hour could only mean one thing: something was wrong. The moment I answered, his voice trembled through the speaker. "I didn't know who else to call," he said, his words rushed and uneven. That alone sent a wave of unease through me. My stepson, Daniel, was not the type to panic. At 22, he was fiercely independent, rarely asking for help. But tonight, something was different. I sat up in bed, gripping the phone tighter. "What's going on?" I asked, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. Was he hurt, stranded, in trouble? The silence that followed felt suffocating. I could hear him breathing, could almost feel the hesitation through the phone. Then he finally spoke. "I need you to come get me." His voice was quieter this time, almost defeated. "Where are you?" I pressed, already throwing back the covers, my pulse quickening. His answer made my blood run cold. It was the last place I ever expected him to be. And the reason he was there? That was even worse. I had no choice. I had to go to him. But I had no idea that what I was about to walk into would change everything. I grabbed my keys and rushed out the door, my mind spinning with questions. Daniel had always been a responsible young man. He worked hard, kept to himself, and never got caught up in trouble. So why was he calling me in the middle of the night, sounding so shaken? And why was he at that place? As I drove, I tried to piece together anything that might make sense. The last time we spoke, everything seemed fine. He had just started a new job and was excited about moving into his own apartment soon. There was no hint of anything being wrong, but now, hearing the unease in his voice, I knew something had happened, something serious. The streets were mostly empty, the glow of streetlights flickering against the wet pavement. My fingers gripped the wheel tighter as I turned onto a road I hadn't driven down in years. The location Daniel had given me wasn't just any place. It was tied to a past I thought we had all moved on from, a past he never spoke about. The closer I got, the heavier the air seemed to feel. Memories I had buried long ago started creeping back, making my stomach twist. I knew Daniel had his own struggles growing up. Losing his mother at a young age had left a hole in his heart, and though I tried my best to be there for him, I always wondered if it was enough. We had built a decent relationship over the years, maybe not perfect, but strong in its own way, and yet he never really opened up about his pain. I pulled up to the spot and killed the engine, scanning the area. The dim light from a nearby building cast long shadows, making everything look eerie. And then I saw him. Daniel stood near the curb, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets, his shoulders slightly hunched. Even from a distance, I could see the tension in his posture. He looked up as I stepped out of the car, his expression unreadable. "What's going on?" I asked carefully, not wanting to push too hard too soon. For a moment, he didn't answer. He just looked at me, as if debating whether to say what was really on his mind. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said something that sent a chill down my spine. "I think I made a mistake." I studied Daniel's face, trying to read between the lines. His jaw was tight, his eyes flickering with something I couldn't quite place. Fear, regret, maybe both. The way he stood, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, told me whatever happened, it wasn't something small. I stepped closer. "What do you mean, you made a mistake?" He glanced around as if making sure we were alone. The street was quiet, only the faint hum of distant traffic in the background. He exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his face before finally meeting my eyes. "I shouldn't have come here," he muttered. "I thought I could handle it, but I was wrong." The weight in his voice made my stomach twist. I wanted to ask 100 different questions, but I knew if I pushed too hard, he might shut down completely. Instead, I kept my tone calm. "Let's get in the car," I said. "We can talk on the way home." He hesitated, but then nodded, walking over and sliding into the passenger seat. I got in and pulled away from the curb, stealing quick glances at him as I drove. His hands were clenched into fists, his leg bouncing slightly. He was wound up tight, his mind clearly racing. I let the silence stretch for a few moments before speaking again. "Daniel, whatever this is, you know you can tell me, right?" He swallowed hard. "It's not that simple. Try me." He sighed, leaning his head back against the seat. "I was trying to help someone," he admitted, "but I think I just made things worse." That wasn't what I expected to hear. My grip on the steering wheel tightened. "Help who?" He hesitated again, staring out the window as streetlights flickered past. "An old friend," he finally said. "Someone I hadn't seen in years. They reached out to me, said they needed a favor. I didn't think much of it at first, but then things got complicated." I felt a sinking feeling in my chest. "Complicated how?" He turned to face me, his expression unreadable. "I don't know who to trust anymore." His words sent a chill through me. Whatever he had gotten himself into, it wasn't just about a favor. It was something deeper, something that had shaken him to his core. And the worst part? I had a feeling we were only just beginning to understand how serious it really was. The air inside the car felt heavy, thick with unspoken words. Daniel kept his gaze fixed on the passing streets, his fingers tapping anxiously against his knee. Whatever he was holding back, it was tearing him up inside. I could see it in the way his shoulders tensed, in the way his breath came just a little too fast. I didn't push him right away. Sometimes silence did more than words ever could. But after a few minutes, I finally said, "Daniel, if you're in trouble, I need to know. I can't help if you don't tell me what's going on." His jaw tightened, and for a second I thought he might shut me out completely. But then, almost reluctantly, he spoke. "It's not just about me," he muttered. "If it was, I wouldn't have called." That sent a fresh wave of concern through me. "Who else is involved?" He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "I don't know how to explain it without making it worse." I kept my voice steady. "Try." He ran a hand through his hair, then finally turned to look at me. "I met up with this friend, someone from way back. He told me he was in trouble, that he needed help, just for one night. He didn't have anywhere else to go." He paused, like he was bracing himself. "I let him stay at my place." I frowned. "Okay, and?" Daniel swallowed hard. "He told me it was nothing serious, just that he needed a place to crash. But tonight, when I got home, something felt off. My stuff had been moved. There were messages on his phone, messages he didn't want me to see. When I confronted him, he got defensive. And then he just left, walked out without explaining anything." The unease in my chest deepened. "Did he threaten you?" "No," Daniel said quickly. "But he didn't have to. The way he acted, it was like he knew something I didn't. Like I was just part of something bigger without even realizing it." I tightened my grip on the wheel. "Do you think he's coming back?" Daniel hesitated, then let out a breath. "I don't know." But right before he left, he looked me right in the eye and said, "You might want to be careful who you trust." A chill ran through me. That wasn't just a warning. That was a message. And I had a sinking feeling that whatever Daniel had gotten caught up in, it wasn't over yet. A cold shiver ran down my spine at Daniel's words. "You might want to be careful who you trust." It wasn't just a warning, it was something else. A message? A threat? I couldn't tell, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Daniel let out a shaky breath, rubbing his hands together like he was trying to warm them. I thought I was doing the right thing, he muttered. I thought I was helping a friend. I kept my eyes on the road, my grip on the wheel tightening. You couldn't have known, I said carefully. But now that you do, we have to figure out what's really going on. Daniel nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. He looked exhausted, like the weight of whatever he was carrying was crushing him. I wanted to tell him everything would be okay, that we'd figure it out together, but I didn't even know what it was yet. Then my phone buzzed. The sharp vibration against the dashboard made both of us jump. I glanced down at the screen, and my stomach dropped. Unknown number. For a second, I considered ignoring it, but something told me this wasn't just a random call. I took a deep breath and answered, "Hello?" There was silence on the other end. Not complete silence, just the faintest sound of breathing. Someone was there, listening. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice steady. A beat passed, then a low voice spoke. "I think you have something that doesn't belong to you." My heart slammed against my ribs. I could feel Daniel stiffen beside me. I swallowed hard. "I don't know what you're talking about." A quiet chuckle came through the line. "Let's not play games. You do know, and I'd hate for things to get complicated." The words sent a chill through me. I opened my mouth to respond, but the line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly, my mind racing. "Who was that?" Daniel asked, his voice tight. I turned to him, my pulse pounding. "I don't know, but they knew we were talking about this." Daniel's face paled. "That doesn't make sense. How would they—" He stopped suddenly, his breath catching. Then, without a word, he dug into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking as he scrolled through his messages. "What is it?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then he turned the screen toward me. "Look at this." I leaned in, and my stomach twisted. There was a new message on his phone, from a number he didn't recognize. The words were simple, but they made my blood run cold. "We know where you are." A heavy silence filled the car. Daniel looked at me, his eyes filled with something I hadn't seen before. Not just fear, realization. "They're watching us," he whispered. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down, I knew he was right. And whatever was happening, we were in deeper than I ever could have imagined. My grip on the steering wheel tightened as the weight of Daniel's words settled over me. "They're watching us." The message on his phone felt like a warning, but the real question was, who was behind it? And why? "We need to go somewhere safe," I said, trying to keep my voice calm even though my heart was racing. "Somewhere they can't track us." Daniel nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. "How do we even know who they are?" he asked. "What if it's—" He stopped mid-sentence, his face suddenly draining of color. "What?" I pressed. "What are you thinking?" Daniel hesitated, then exhaled sharply. "What if it's not about me?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "What if it's about you?" A chill ran through me. That hadn't even crossed my mind. But before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Without thinking, I answered. A familiar voice came through the line, one I hadn't heard in years. "You should have stayed out of this." I felt the air leave my lungs. I knew that voice. It was someone from my past, someone I had hoped to never hear from again. And now, somehow, they were tied to Daniel's situation. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded, my voice tight. "What do you want?" A pause. Then, with unsettling calm, the voice replied, "You know exactly what I want. You always have." The call ended. Daniel was staring at me now, his expression a mix of fear and confusion. Who was that? I swallowed hard, my mind racing. The truth hit me all at once, and it made my blood run cold. This wasn't about Daniel, it was about me, and somehow my past had come back to haunt us both. Before I could explain, headlights appeared in the rearview mirror. A black car following close, too close. My stomach twisted. We have to lose them, I said, gripping the wheel. Daniel's eyes widened. What's going on? I'll explain later, I muttered. Just hold on. I hit the gas, my heart pounding as the car behind us sped up to match. I had spent years trying to outrun my past, but now it had finally caught up. And the worst part? I wasn't sure if we were going to make it out this time. The tires screeched as I swerved onto a side street, my pulse hammering in my ears. The black car followed, its headlights glowing in the rearview mirror like two unblinking eyes. I had no idea how far they would go, but I wasn't about to wait and find out. Daniel braced himself, gripping the door handle. Who was that on the phone? He asked again, his voice strained. I clenched my jaw, knowing I couldn't keep it from him any longer. Someone from my past, I admitted. Someone I thought I'd never hear from again. He stared at me, processing my words, but before he could ask more, I spotted a narrow alleyway ahead. Without thinking, I cut the wheel hard and dove into it, slamming off the headlights as I coasted into the darkness. The black car sped past the entrance, missing us by seconds. We sat in silence, both of us barely breathing. I waited, watching the street. A few moments later, the car slowed and then disappeared down the road. Daniel let out a shaky breath. Are they gone? For now, I said, though I wasn't convinced. My hands were still tight on the wheel, my body stiff with adrenaline. He turned to me. What do they want from you? I swallowed hard, my past flashing before my eyes. It's not about what they want. It's about what I know. Daniel's face darkened. And because I got involved, they're after me too? I sighed, the weight of it all pressing down on me. I didn't mean for this to happen, I said, but I promise you, I'll fix it. Daniel stared at me for a long moment before nodding. Then let's end this. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just my fight anymore. Whatever unfinished business had come back to haunt me, we were in it together.